background has always been manual therapy, manipulative. And so, out of desperation in 1986, I was sitting around in south central Pennsylvania, whining about who I can study with next after running out of people I was interested in studying with. And a friend of mine suggested John Upledger, and I thought that was a really weird name. So who has a name like Upledger? Gosh. So anyway, he was teaching craniosacral therapy. My friend didn't know what that was all about, and I didn't either, but he was teaching it in West Palm Beach in the end of January. So I said, I'm coming to the beach. If I don't like the work, I don't care. I'm coming to the beach. Getting out of Pennsylvania. So anyway, that was 40-some years ago. And so I transitioned probably within 10 minutes to the power of the craniosacral work. And I have found it is the most powerful tool I've ever encountered. In all of my tools that I don't have acupuncture, and I don't have manipulative skills of chiropractic or the osteopathic approach. I have it from a PT perspective. But this work is phenomenal for balancing out sympathetic nervous system like nothing else I've ever encountered. And it's totally light touch work. Based on the premise the body produces cerebrospinal fluid. And it's a circulation, drainage, and production cycle that creates a rhythm. And Dr. John, back in the mid-70s, developed a theory behind the rhythm, and he called it basically a pressure stat model, which was nervous system regulated by a nerve that ran from the middle of the sagittal suture, which is the junction between the two parietal bones, to the lateral ventricle. And the lateral ventricle then would control production and drainage cycle. Well, most recent research out there is saying that doesn't seem to be accurate. He was doing it with his hands in 75, and he came up with a pretty good, thought the rhythm, which is generated with about 6 times a minute, could vary a little bit above or below that, but the average is about 6 times a minute. And so the most recent research, which is done by a gentleman named Thomas Rasmussen, who is a part of the Upledger Institute. He's a major instructor in Europe, primarily Denmark. He's also an engineer, so he designed equipment to measure the cranial rhythm. And he's developed, after looking at probably thousands and thousands of articles on some of the most recent brain research, came up with a different theory on the generation of this rhythm through the body. And he calls it his pacemaker theory. So what scientists have discovered, the neuroanatomists, that at the level of the fourth ventricle, which is the brainstem, there are oscillating neurons. And these oscillating neurons oscillate at 6 times a minute. And being in the brainstem, it's very connected to the central nervous system as well as the sympathetic nervous system. They also have discovered oscillating neurons in the arterial wall. So also oscillating 6 times a minute. So they've come up with this concept that the pacemaker theory is similar to the pacemaker of the heart. That's regulated by the body's consciousness and nervous system. Probably it's an integration of cranial rhythm and heart rate and breath and circadian rhythm and sympathetic nervous system rhythm. When all those rhythms are in harmony, the body is healthy and vibrant. When it's not, you have problems. So this whole rhythm is still 6 times a minute, but now it's more of a vasomotor response as opposed to just a nerve fiber being turned and turned off. And how that happens is a gene is there to create this rhythm pattern. It creates a protein. That protein travels by synapse to the brainstem, activates the receptor that says turn on, and as it turns on, this pulsation, this waveform is created, oscillating 6 times a minute. And as that happens, the protein is degrading, or is into entropy, so the whole tissue, the protein degrades, goes back into those elements. The rhythm kind of stops, doesn't stop, it slows down. So we get this on-off cycle, now regulated more by the nervous system than just a nerve fiber tract. So, same rhythm, different theories behind it, still a theory because no one knows. People know that there's CSF, they know the circulation drainage pathways very well now. They just have no theory, under total hardcore theory, what creates the rhythm in the body. Which seems to be a nervous system depolarization and activation of these oscillating neurons in the body tissue. So that's a rhythm? So, I know Keith had asked me, I recently did a talk with dentists. And dentists are a very interesting group. You know, their specialty has always been occlusion, head and neck posture, TMJ stuff. Now they're into airway management. That seems to be the newest trend in dental work. Because the TMJ stuff hasn't worked real well. I was working with a group of dentists for a while. There's one of the devices that opens up the airway. It's really for sleep apnea, snoring issues, or children with a very high narrow palate, but they want to expand the palate. And this Vivos appliance is probably $10,000 to $15,000 out of pocket, not covered by insurance. So they wanted craniosacral to be a part of that. They wanted to be craniosacral before they applied the appliance, after they took out for adjustments, and they wanted craniosacral. And we were negotiating how to do that. I was kind of negotiating for Outledger, and it turned out they ended up going a different direction. I think they went with Barry Gillespie, and since Barry's a dentist, they kind of followed that dental path with him, I think. Anyway, I had this one dentist who had the actual courage to say online in an open broadcast of a Zoom with multiple people listening that you never can have straight teeth with a crooked body, because the occlusion is driven by the pelvis. And this is the Upledger model. John Upledger said TMJ in particular was always a dynamic reflection of the trauma pattern of the body. And so if you didn't treat the whole body, treating the TMJ by itself is worthless. You're spending a lot of money. So anyway, I got invited to talk to a group. I've had the privilege to talk to the Neerman group. You guys may know them up in Tequesta. It's a dental practice. Actually, they teach airway work to dentists. They teach workshops for dentists on airway, TMJ, and they also have a subset of the business, which is a billing mechanism for dental practices. Anyway, I've done 2 presentations to them, and they're very interested. But you know, most dentists, as lovely as they are, they can't work below their neck. Practice that. They can't touch you where the problem starts. And so I got invited to talk to this group of dentists on a collaborative response. So it was dentists that know craniosacral, that wanted to open up the world to the power of craniosacral, working with dentists for TMJ, head and neck issues, airway issues. And so I think it went well. We had about 140 people on that talk. Most of them were a mixture of craniosacral people and dentists from around the world. I think they had like 10 different nations involved on that video call. And then they have it online for reviewing the video, and I think anyone who's a member of that organization can download the videos. And they've been doing, since this is airway month, so they're doing talks on different types of airway issues from different approaches every day of October. They've been running workshops. I just happen to be one of them on the site. So anyway, I think when you're looking at, you know, the whole message of the craniosacral work vis-a-vis John Upledger is he's working with a rhythm pattern. It's called the biomechanical rhythm. And it's really about 6 times a minute. Now that rhythm is produced by the brain, circulating, producing CSF, circulating through the central nervous system. The nervous system activation into the body gives you the rhythm in the body. So you get this very gentle, subtle widening and narrowing, as well as bones in general are moving into what's called flexion or extension. But body parts tend to move as the whole system is expanding, the body widening, it narrows ever so slightly. So in that rhythm, it should be symmetrical. Left to right, head to toe, top to bottom. It should have a quality that's either strong, powerful, hopefully not weak and empty and all the other adjectives that describe not a good quality. Amplitude is the range of motion, and the rate should be about 6 times a minute. So basically, we always learn in the cranial work how to read the body from that perspective. It is physical, but it's also energetic. You know, there's always an energetic exchange when you work with a client. The people who don't understand that end up with burnout because they take stuff on from the clients. It's really about learning how to raise your frequency and not take that stuff on. But anyway, the Upledger models, we're looking at reading the body, hands-on. Symmetry, quality, amplitude, rate from the feet to the head should all be the same. When there is an abnormal rhythm pattern or any of those parameters are off, that just says something is wrong. At the introductory level of teaching this class, it doesn't tell you where the problem is. It might give you an idea, but it doesn't necessarily give you hardcore issues as what the issue is, where is the source of it. In the advanced classes, you start looking at how to find that. But in the beginning classes, since you don't have to know, Dr. John was very clear, we'll just treat the whole body. Don't worry about it. You assess the quality of the rhythm, the symmetry, the balance of it before the treatment, and when you're all done, it should be improved. That's the deal. And it's the process of taking the compensations that we carry, because we all carry compensations, is how we survive. And when the compensations don't work anymore, that's when you come for treatment. Wherever you go, when you start having symptoms, you start thinking something's wrong, so you go get help. So what I love about craniosacral work is it takes those compensations and kind of screws them up a little bit. It changes the compensation, lets the body recompensate in a healthier way. So it's a progression in treatment. So hopefully every day they should be a little bit better every time you see it. Not always the case, but that's what we're looking for as a craniosacral practitioner or therapist. So we're using these modalities to help the body find itself. Now the other major thing about the cranial work on the uploading model is the treatment is designed to work with the patient's inner wisdom or inner guidance. Now, when this all started, it all started back in the 1860s. When you look at the history of craniosacral therapy, cranio-osteopathy, it goes all back to osteopathy in general. A.T. Still, the founder of the osteopathic movement, lived with the Shawnee and Cherokee, so he got most of his information from Shawnee Nation. And he also got it from some very eclectic thinkers in Sweden that were looking at brain, mind, and soul back in the 1800s. So it was a pretty interesting development. But he developed this whole school on the fact that structure and function are interrelated, i.e. compensation. If you have an injury, you compensate around it. And we've all seen patients that have lost extremities and how they adapt to that. You see that with animals all the time. So structure and function are interrelated. You have a change in one, the body compensates to fill in the void. The other is that the body is a unified whole. So the problem with society in our medical model is we've become very reductionistic. Just because you have a rotator cuff injury or a shoulder injury does not mean it's necessarily that's where the problem is. That may be the somatic outpicture, but how about the pleura, the lung, the fascia, maybe the liver, respiratory diaphragm. Maybe it's the ovary or omentum. Maybe it's the pelvic diaphragm. So that pathway is always through the body. So the up-ledger model, based on these core principles, looks for that. So we're looking for where are the connectors. We're not just going to treat a shoulder, we're going to treat the whole body. Because it is mind, body, spirit. And then some people, they stick with body. That's all they want to know. Help me get out of pain, let me function better. I don't care about my inner child. I don't care about my emotional stuff. I don't want to do past life regression work. I don't want to do astral projection. I want to come in, help me with this problem. And there are some people who come in and just said, don't talk to me, put me on your table, put the music on, turn the lights down, wake me up in an hour. They love the place of being in that alpha state, because the cranial work will take you, when you peel that sympathetic system off, you're right in that deep relaxation. It's right on the cusp of an alpha state meditation place. So that's when change happens. That's the transformational place. So some people are looking to go, why do I do this? You're always waiting for the magic question in cranial work. They say, I love this work. It feels wonderful. Take care of my symptoms, but everyone, they come back after a while. And so you just look at them and you smile and you say, are you just asking or do you really want to know? Because if they're just asking, they don't want to know. They're just kind of placating somebody who said, find out why you still have this problem. Usually it's a significant other problem. So, especially when the wife sends a guy in, you've got some interesting things going on. But anyway, when they ask you that question, that's when you say, are you really willing to look at the belief systems that create your problem in the first place? Because no matter how good we are in the world of body work, no or what your specialty is. Until they ask you that question and they really are willing to look at belief system, nothing's really going to change. It's like until they ask that question and they're willing to look at their vulnerability, look at the trauma patterns that most of them develop these trauma patterns and belief systems in the first 5 years of their life. This is Bruce Lipton's work. If you look at Bruce Lipton's, his Biology of Belief is a great book. It changed the whole consciousness on perception of reality and genetic activation. But his other book was on the honeymoon effect. So the honeymoon effect was, here's this brilliant scientist who has changed the state of the world thought process about genes. And he could not stay in a romantic relationship for a hoot. Every 7 years it exploded. And he was frustrated with that. He said, I'm smart. Why can't I be in a loving relationship? So what he did is jumped into research. So he found out that children in utero and up to the first 5 years of life are recording everything they hear, everything they see. They don't have language for it, but where it's going is limbic system. And this is your program, this is operational, it's like your computer program. It's in the background, working all the time. So he said 95% of what you do today is what you did yesterday. Only 5% of your neocortex is in charge of behavior. I always like to think of, in my classes I'll often say, so you think your neocortex is in charge. Think about January 1st. Just came through the holidays. Thanksgiving, maybe Hanukkah, maybe Christmas. And you ate way too many bad foods, too many sweets, too many alcoholic beverages perhaps, not sleeping right, going to parties. And on January 1st you wake up and say, I'm not doing this again. So I'm going to get a beach squad this year. I'm tired of this. And you sign up. And I go to Planet Fitness because it's cheap to get out. It's $10 a month, you can get out. You go to LA Fitness, you're going to mortgage your house to get out. So you go somewhere cheap. You go to Planet Fitness. You change to a keto diet, or now the Mediterranean diet. You do something, you're going to make this change this time. And about 6 weeks later, you decide you're tired of going to the gym. It's raining, it's bad weather, I'm not going out there. And then, so your neocortex is just sitting there laughing the whole time, saying, the limbic system is saying, we do this every year, it never works. Let's go get a beer. Or let's go get some sweets. Let's go get a brownie. So your body is driven by this belief system that you formulated at 5, and it works until it doesn't work. And that's what we're working for. So you're waiting for that magic. That takes them into the world of somatoemotional release. That's when we start looking at behavior pattern. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And when they hit that place of vulnerability and they're willing to look at that, then they have a chance to really change. It may require lifestyle change, which isn't always happy or excitable to a lot of people. That usually requires something different in your life to get out of what you're already creating. So that's the essence of the craniosacral work, is helping the power of the individual through their inner wisdom. Because the other interesting thing that the up-ledger model always represents is the higher self knows what to do. That's our inner physician, our inner guidance, our inner awareness, whatever you want to call it. For some people it's a divine presence, for some people it's a white unicorn, or it's a green frog, or it's just an inner knowing wisdom, that intuitive nature. That's what you wake up every morning at 3 in the morning. Some of us old enough to know that's why you have to wake up and go to the bathroom anyway. But that's usually when the veils of information are the thinnest. That's when you get those aha moments. You go to bed churning about it. The lower self thinks, the higher self knows. So when you're trying to think about how to get out of your creations that you have created, you can't get out because you keep doing the same thing based on limbic system. So the craniosacral work, as it goes into the SER world, is designed to take you into the veil of the illusion, through it, into the reality that this is a choice you made, and you can change the choice. So, a lot of times when we get into the SER world, which, Vivian runs a nice study group here through the up-ledger organization for SER stuff, and we're starting to look at, most of us get caught up in the belief system we did something wrong, we betrayed ourselves, it's our fault. And so when you realize at the age of 3 to 5, you make a decision to survive. And so I think as a child, you make a decision to survive. Some become bullies, some become pleasers, some become chameleons, some become jokers, class clowns, some become Winnie the Pooh characters. Maybe it's Pooh, maybe it's a Tigger, maybe it's an Eeyore, or a rabbit. Whatever philosophy of life that you can adapt to survive in, you'll use until it doesn't work anymore. So that's when the SER work takes you into that and says, okay, who are you really? And you look at the empowerment is, when you realize at 5 years old you made a choice to survive, that's not betrayal, that is really a very high order of consciousness thought, which is way beyond the toddler brain. So it's into the soul essence of the child, which takes the cranial work from the basic palpatory, gentle manipulative work into the esoteric world of mind, body, spirit. So the work can go anywhere it needs to go based on what the client wants to do. People in the craniosacral work get into trouble when they push the river. And they like the exciting stories to come out so they can be a part of the story. Sometimes it's not time for the patient to go there. But most of the people that are well trained don't do that. So that's the goal. So the craniosacral work to me is the most profound sympathetic balancing technique I've ever encountered. I think acupuncture probably comes pretty close, but I'm not an acupuncturist. So.
You put them together.
Yeah, that's what a beautiful marriage that is. Craniosacral and acupuncture. Because they're both inside-out treatments. Every other treatment I know is outside in. Whoever is the strongest wins. And that's why so many of our students in our classes are tired of the heavy force, the sore knuckles, the sore thumbs, the sore elbows, all that heavy pressure wears you out after a while. 5 grams of we're hardly very touching the client, and we're evoking significant change in the tissue. So craniosacral and acupuncture, that and visceral, I think those three are the phenomenal marriage of the optimal body work. Obviously though, if we had all the answers, there would be no one else doing anything. Well, that's not the case. So everyone has different pathways that they're looking to walk down to find an answer. So I just think craniosacral, to me, is the best one I've ever encountered in my toolbelt. So the other interesting thing about dentists, from the upledger model, we have relationships. Like the sacrum and occiput do the exact same thing in craniosacral movement. The sphenoid is the bone behind the eyes, which goes opposite the sphenoid and sacrum. So if you have a sacral rotation, the occiput tends to go the same direction, the sphenoid goes opposite. Now what comes off the sphenoid are the lateral pterygoid muscles, which go to the jaw. Those muscles are designed to open the jaw symmetrically, 40 to 45 millimeters. But if the sphenoid is sitting this way, they're not going to be symmetrical. Have you ever gone to a playground and jumped on a big swing? And teenagers were there the night before and they grabbed those bars. And here's your swing. So if your sphenoid is sitting this way, that's where your jaw goes. And then you throw in the masseter issue, which is the clenching and grinding stuff. So much of the TMJ issue comes from the pelvic floor. If the sacrum is off, the occiput's off, the sphenoid off, the mandible will definitely be off. If the sphenoid's off, the maxilla is off. Because here's the maxilla, this is a cranial bone, maxilla. Every 6 times a minute, it's doing this. Of course, it's microns. It's millimicrons, but it's still moving. So when you put an appliance around, like an orthodontic, you have one jaw locked in here, one maxilla, and by the time they wrap the bands around, maybe the other one's over here. So now what you do is you take the sphenoid and bend it this way. Or if you lock them in this way, now you take the sphenoid and bend it this way. These are kids that go from honor student to failing in 2 or 3 days after the orthodontia's in. So anything crossing the midline, the hard palate, can shut down your cranial system, and that's going to lead to sympathetic biasing and all kinds of problems that go with it. So TMJ from the upledger model is intimately related to the pelvic floor. Sacrum, ilium. We have these ilial bones related to the temporal bones. So I think I've probably done a demonstration of about 10 or 15 people so far today, and everyone has a leg length discrepancy.
The what?
Leg length discrepancy. long leg. Short leg.
Oh, yeah.
And you can tell which side of the coast they live on. If you're on this coast, you have a long right leg. If you're on that coast, a long left leg. Depends on which, the leaning one. And all roads are cambered, so if you're a runner and you have to be running on cambered roads, you're always going to have a long left leg in most runners. If you're worried about getting hit by a truck, you run facing traffic. So all country roads are cambered. So the pelvic floor has so much to do with the head, neck, and posture. You look at cervical posturing. I mean, that posture drives the jaw down and forward. And so most of our work is restrained postural biomechanics. We get the head and neck up out of that turtle posture we get into. So the other interesting thing about TMJ from the cranial perspective is bruxism, clenching and grinding. That often goes with TMJ issues. Now, when I was doing my more traditional PT stuff, I tried everything I knew how to do. Of course, it was so long ago, I didn't have cold laser, and I didn't have cupping, and I didn't have dry needling or any of these things that seem to be popular modalities. I had my hands, I had ultrasound, I had iontophoresis, which is driving steroids in with your ultrasound machine, various heat modalities. Nothing worked. Trigger point work, I couldn't solve because the masseter, if you think of what the masseter does, it punches and grinds. It's a major closer. Think about, let's go back to the first chakra again. Look at the cranial, the sacral base. From an energetic perspective, that's the first chakra. It's also related to reptilian brain. So reptilian brain is survival brain, dominated by sympathetic nervous system. This is road rage. So whenever you're being driven by the survival brain, you're 7. So next time you're driving down 95, and someone cuts you off, there's a 7-year-old behind the wheel. You can't argue with a 7-year-old behind the wheel. Plus now he probably has a gun. So just leave it go. Let him go. Don't slide up in front of him and do pump brakes. You're looking for trouble. Just remember, when we're having a hissy fit like that, that's a 7-year-old behavior. You don't. If you ever try to negotiate with your child, having a hissy fit in the grocery store, the candy aisle, or the toy store. They want, it's Christmas coming, I want this, I want that. You can't teach them logically how that's not appropriate at that moment in time until they're out of that, into a place where you can sit down and talk to them about behavior patterns. So, if you look at the behavior of the reptilian brain, which is also survival brain, brainstem, pons, and medulla. That's fourth ventricle area. Highly innervated. So all the sensory data that your body has, millions and millions of stimuli per second, go into the reticular activating system. Reticular activating system sends that to the limbic system. That's the amygdala and hippocampus. What I understand, the amygdala tends to know a trauma pattern event happened, doesn't know anything about it. So it doesn't know it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, psychological, it just knows abuse. Well, the hippocampus has texture around it, from what I understand, so it knows it can put the two together and tell you when that event's happening. But if you think of the reptiles in general, since we have a lot of those buggers running around here, their defense system, when they're approached, is either run to you or run away. Most of them run away, or they try to bite you. So, the defense mechanism for the survival brain, reptilian brain, brainstem, reticular activating system, flashes to the limbic system flashes to the sympathetic system, and now you have a trigeminal nerve which is activated, which causes the crunching and grinding. Bruxism. So it's neurologically modulated. It has nothing to do with the muscle. Muscle doesn't have a brain, it just does what it's told to do. So, then you look at your toddlers, and what do toddlers do when they're afraid? They either run away from you. There's nothing faster on the planet than a toddler with a Lego in his mouth. And you're trying to get it out, you're chasing him around the room. But then when you get it, you try to get it out, they're going to bite you. So toddlers, their defense mechanism is to run away from you or bite you. That's reptilian brain. So now when our kids get in trouble in school for biting, it's not because they're angry, it's because they're afraid. So it's usually a fear-based response. This is our clients. Sympathetic nervous system, ever since COVID came on the scene. and body politic. The clients we're seeing are living in a sympathetically biased world, fear-based behavior pattern. So the craniosacral work, I think is actually, when we really break it down to what it really is, we have a few techniques. It's really a philosophy of treatment based on structure and function interrelated, the body's a unified whole, and there's a divine or an inner wisdom that controls the healing process. There's a thought that just flashed. So my problem is I'm a Pisces, and Pisces don't ever go in a straight line. I also have senior moments. I don't know which is which. So.
I have a question.
Sure, fire away.
So how do you deal with someone that has dementia, so can't do inner child work or trauma work? Will the brain somehow still benefit from the?
Great question. One of our colleagues, Michael Morgan, the craniosacral therapist and structure therapist, who's been there a long time. His specialty is Alzheimer's. He's done a lot of research on Alzheimer's and application of craniosacral therapy. In fact, he's everywhere. Anytime there's an Alzheimer meeting, he's at it. He does TED Talks all over the place. Probably YouTube as well. Michael Morgan. He has found that if you catch the Alzheimer or dementia patient early to moderate level, you can make a significant difference in slowing down the progression. Because you enhance circulation pathways.
I'm sorry, I think I'm in the wrong place. I'm looking for D.
No, not. Do you know where
No, not here.
Okay,
No problem. Go through the main entrance.
thank you.
No problem.
You're welcome if you want to.
Entrance to the
No charge. 5 minutes with the timer. Oh, good job. All right, so Alzheimer's. If you catch it early, and he's done some really significant research looking at craniosacral therapy done individually and in group dynamics with multiple hands on it. So, since most of the time, even with non-Alzheimer's patients, we're not talking to the personality of the patient on the table, we're talking to inner physician.
Okay.
So even if the Alzheimer client cannot communicate, you're talking to the inner physician, not the personality consciousness.
Okay.
And you can make a huge difference. If the more advanced they are, the less likelihood they're going to hold.
Okay.
So my mother had pretty advanced Alzheimer's. And so when we would go visit, to make it a better palatable time for my wife to be with her mother and to have some recognition from mom to daughter, we would have a couple cranial sessions come in once a week for 3 to 4 weeks before we came. And during that time frame, the connection, the knowledge, the remembering was much, much better. Didn't stay, but it was there. So you can make a difference.
So do you still practice?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm in Jupiter.
Okay. What booth are you in?
Hmm?
What table?
I'm in the back, you know that stupid, excuse me, erase that. Do you know that big machine that has a globe?
Oh, yeah.
I'm back, I'm near Salt Suite. Salt Suite's in the
Yes,
floor.
okay.
I'm beside that.
Okay.
I'm between Rife and technology.
Okay.
I'm between Rife and Salt.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
So anyway, I have 3 minutes. Any other questions? My timer is efficient.
Well, just to base off of her question too, because we have the lymphatic system in the brain now, and we're saying everything's inflammation. So it's all inflammation
Sure.
in the brain. And then can you say how this works with it?
Sure. Also you're looking at everything is vagus nerve. So you look at so much of Alzheimer's, dementia, MS, Parkinson's, they're really making a strong link to leaky gut syndrome. Because the glia of the gut's the same as the glia of the brain. And with a fascial connection, there's a direct connection from the body fascia to the brain. So it goes right through the blood-brain barrier. So the lymphatic system, another system that no one thought existed until 10 years ago. I know Bruno Chickley and John Upledge had these arguments all the time. Chickley was always saying, there's a lymphatic system in the brain. Yes, there is. John said, no, there isn't. So they had that argument, well, Chickley was right. I'm sure he's emailed John on the other side to say he was right. But so much of what we do with the cranial work is restore harmony and enhancement of the craniosacral system, which actually is like a chelating agent. So it actually helps chelate toxins out of the brain. And then if you add an offshoot of this, the traditional craniosacral work is a work that Tad Wanger developed, which is called touching the brain, which is a technique using cranial concepts, a cranial touch, but now you're working the glial system, looking at the blood-brain barrier. You're looking at the aquaporphins, or the pathways of the cells coming into the brain, and looking at how to work with various lobes to restore harmony and balance. So touching the brain is phenomenal for any one of us that needs some brain work, for brain fog, senior moments, whatever. So that's pretty much, I think, what I found with cranial work is that it will benefit almost anybody, but not everyone benefits. So, you know, like everything else, it's, you know, the cranial work is designed to help the body fix itself. Sometimes it requires lifestyle changes. Not everyone's willing to do that. Whether it's diet, job, partners, whatever it is, sometimes whatever you're doing has created the problem. If you want to get out of the problem, as Einstein says, you can't use the same level of thinking that created the problem in the first place. So change requires a change of thought. And the cranial work, I think, helps the body do that if they're so willing. So it's kind of the essence. It's very light touch. It's very nice work. What else can you do? Sit holding someone's head for an hour, listening to music in the quasi-meditative state and getting paid. It's not bad. So that's the story. Any other thoughts or questions? Stop. Yes, ma'am.
Milton.
Oh my gosh, so cute.
Why do many osteopaths don't do osteopathic manipulation anymore?
No, they don't.
They just do medical.
Well, they traded their skill set for pecking order. Every discipline climbs that ladder of wanting to be the gatekeeper. We all know, you know, we all started that way. You know, MDs are at the top. Everyone's trying to climb that ladder. They want to be the gatekeeper for insurance and power and control. Osteopaths gave away their true nature, I think. I mean, they're still, I think, more eclectic and looking at the whole body than an MD would do. So I think it's still a benefit. And most of the osteopathic techniques are electives, which is really scary.
Wow.
I mean, they don't have to take any of those anymore. So the old osteopaths still do craniosteopathy, but not many. So that's why John Upledger had to solve the void. He says, let's fill it with other people. So that's why those of us who are non-osteopaths do this work. And some osteopaths do. Chiropractors, acupuncturists, massage therapists, PTs, OTs, and just good old people. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure coming to
How
see
long
you.
have you been going there?
40 years.
That's it?
That's it?
We'll stop by your.
40 years, yeah.
Thank you for-
Teaching for 38 of them.